Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast, the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education. The goal is to provide meaningful conversation to what is currently happening in our classrooms. Stories, pains, moments of success. We want to hear it all. And hear it all we shall, because we are at the first episode of 2024 with Under the Hat. And to make it even more exciting, we're here with the one, the only, Fonz from MyEdtech Life. But wait. That's not a good way to intro Fonz, because there's no way that we can start 2024 with Under the Hat without my good friend.
Oh,
Got to give that love there to everything that you have done, Fonz, for me personally, for so many in education and on social with your show, everything else. But first of all, how are you, sir? How's it going?
I am doing great. Thank you so much. And I definitely appreciate the love, Steve. This is wonderful. Again, I know that this is something that you and I have talked about for a long time. And, like I said, it's been an honor and a pleasure to see you and encourage you to take this step and, calling me and like, hey, this is what I want to do and so on, and just to be able to help you out. So this is great. And honestly, it is an honor to be here with you as your first guest on your show. And it's an honor to be here on the receiving end of questions. As as often I'm the one that's asking the questions, it's always great to be on this side, a little bit more relaxed and getting to really just let out my thoughts and ideas and everything. So that's great. Thank you so much for the invite.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I just am super thrilled and pumped to have the show up and running. And so for those that are listening, whether it's live or sometime in the future, Fonz was really the one that really was like, wait, Steve, why don't you start your own show? You're like basically on a podcast a week kind of thing. I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot, right? And so I'm super pumped and thrilled to be here, to be with all of you. So to kind of, before we dive in with things, Fonz, just so many people know you, right? So it's not like you're as your first time out there, doing your thing, sharing your knowledge. But for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about your context, where you are in education, and also a little bit like with the show as well, because like there's like this, you wear multiple hats, Fonz, is what I'm getting at. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of share where you're at, where you've come, and perhaps where you're going.
Absolutely. Well, again, for those of you that may not be aware of who I am, my name is Alfonso Mendoza, but everybody calls me Fonz. So anytime you see me, you could definitely just call me Fonz. And I am the host of the MyEdtech Life podcast. And prior to that, it's really just been, growing up, going to college, not wanting to be an educator, but then fell into education and absolutely fell in love with education. So 18 years later, here I am in education and just continuing my work. And through the podcast, hoping to reach out to many more educators, bringing some amazing, meaningful conversations with wonderful guests that you can take some knowledge nuggets from, sprinkle them onto what you guys are already doing great. So I do wear multiple hats, like Steve said. So not only am I the host of the MyEdtech Life podcast, but I'm also an instructional software specialist for a school district here in deep South Texas. And by deep South Texas, I mean south of San Antonio, where we call the Rio Grande Valley. And so I am been working for the same school district for 18 years and kind of moved my way up from starting off as an algebra teacher for my first 3 years and then moving down into elementary, sixth grade, fifth grade. And that's really where I kind of found my passion for education, taking risks, learning, and diving in deep into education practice, and just been thrilled and excited for that long. And of course, having the opportunity to move into this role as the instructional software specialist, which for many districts, they may be called something different, just like a tech coach, or they've got like digital coaches or digital innovation coaches, and there's different titles, but really it's just coaching our educators with the platforms that we use and anything new that we're rolling out and providing professional development for our district. So that's really where I'm at. And also a doctoral student. Hopefully by the end of this year, I should already be done with that process, and fingers crossed. And I'm just really excited about that. And again, thrilled to be here with you all. And I see Stacy and Samantha that are here. Katie also excited that she's here. Thank you so much for y'all joining us live for this wonderful conversation.
Yeah. So wait, at some point, do I get to call you Dr. Fonz?
At some point, hopefully in
At
the
some point.
future.
That that's gonna be when that happens. Hopefully, we'll eventually run into each other like in person at a conference. I'm looking forward to that, Dr. Fonz. It just rolls off the tongue well, is what
there,
I'm
you,
getting at.
there you
Uh,
go.
no, that's very cool. That's very cool. So, because you have that context of working with elementary students
Mhm.
and high school students, right? So that I don't, at least in my area in California, like that doesn't happen too often. Like it does, but so if you were to like put it in like one word, what is the biggest difference from a teacher perspective
Mhm.
from elementary to high school?
Well, for me personally, like this is what I always said, having three
Mm,
years of experience in high school. And the course that I taught was Algebra 1, and we were on block schedule. So I would see about 90 to 100 kids every semester. So it was 2 semesters that we had.
mm,
So really the different, oh, and I'm sorry, I also meant to say that not only were they just ninth graders, but they were the ones that had to take the class multiple times because of state
mm,
testing that they needed to
mhm,
take. So I had even seniors at that level. And then
mm,
when I moved down to sixth grade, truly what I found out is really that there is no difference other than the age. One thing that I learned very quick is, every student has a need. That personalization really helped. And like I said, coming from business and sales into education, that's one of the things that I always attribute a lot of my success to. If anything, I attribute all of my success to what I learned in my marketing classes and in my business classes, and also working with customers all the time. That personalized experience, knowing the customers. So in reality, my experience wasn't very shocking of, oh my gosh, now I'm here with sixth graders as opposed to, young adults. It really, the age is the only difference. Other than that, they all still need that love. They all still need that attention. And I was happy to give it to them, in a way that made the learning fun for them.
yeah, and the only reason why I bring it up is not working now in adult ed in a credential program now. Like I kind of hear that a lot, where like Steve, you taught seniors, I'm scared of seniors. Or it's like the other way around, where like I was low key kind of scared of elementary students. I was like, I wouldn't even know, that's not my personality, or like whatever the case is. So I think there's a lot of talent with that, right? Like being able to flex in that way, or at least maybe courage. I think that we all probably have the skill set, but having the courage to kind of navigate various grade levels. And so that's kind of, that's what's top of mind for me right now as you're talking about that. But Fonz, if you don't mind, I'm gonna really, this show really could be another title, and it's really the one question show, where really we just are going to navigate around that one question, and that one question of what is top of mind for Fonz, right? In education, doesn't have to be ed tech, and it doesn't have to be one thing. It could be several things. And so like we're going to take this journey over the next 45, 50 minutes. But Fonz, for you, like right now, like what is something that is constantly on your mind, maybe keeping you up at night, maybe something that you're like, wow, this is going really well in my district, whatever it is, right? Because this question can get very nuanced. But for you, what is top of mind? What is under your cap at the moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's two things that I want to talk about today, but the first thing that I want to lead off with is really about my philosophy in really anything that is ed tech, tech related, or even if it's not even tech related, it's just really keeping it simple and streamlined. That's what it is for me. And so I know I've done some presentations. It's like kiss your AI, keep it simple and streamlined. And I was on another podcast too, talking about, tech coaching. And for me, the philosophy is the same, keep it simple and streamlined. Don't run a lot of plays. And what I mean by that is the following. And again, and I'm speaking just from my experience. So I'm thankful that I get, a platform where I get to share, because many times it's not often you get to hear me share. But for me, growing up, and I don't know, maybe I attribute it to just the way that I grew up, being an only child and not having too many friends around, not coming in, with
Mm,
uh, very well off family, just hardworking, definitely had to be very resourceful, very scrappy, and just really the ability to improvise, adapt, and overcome, because sometimes there were some needs that couldn't be met. And how can we adapt to those needs and so on? So I think growing up, it was just all about keeping it simple and learning that maybe many times less is more. And so, coming into education, again, like I said, I wanted to go into college for business because I wanted to make money. I wanted to be rich. Growing up the way that I grew up, I needed to find a solution to
mm,
help my parents, to get them out of the life that they were leading and working, and because they were just working very hard. And I'm that first gen, and the pressure's on and so on. So that didn't pan out the way that I wanted it to, but it worked out either way, and it worked out for the best. And so coming into education, I learned that I definitely need to keep it very simple. And right now, what I see in the ed tech space, and really in any space, is just so many apps. We live in an age where there's a new app coming out every week, or there's apps that are doing some new things. They continue to grow, and it's great. And they're wonderful instruments to know that you can go ahead and use in your classrooms and so on. And again, I was, one of the first ones to always be like, oh, I want to try this tool, and I want to try this tool, and I want to take this risk, and I want to take that risk, and use those in the classroom. But later on, I found out that the more that you bring in, really, it's the more work that you're going to be doing, in the sense of now you've got multiple platforms that you're diving into. Your students are diving into multiple platforms, and sometimes parents are diving into those multiple platforms too, because now they're getting notifications from 10 platforms instead of one or two or three. Now, again, not to take anything away from anybody, but this is just what's been very helpful to me, is really keep it's simple and streamlined. Find the three best platforms that you are good at, that you feel comfortable with, and are allowing you to really enhance your learning. You have to think of yourself as a learning engineer. It's not the term teacher is so powerful. You really are learning engineers, and you're engineering and enhancing wonderful learning experiences for your students through the use of technology. And oftentimes that can be very, very overwhelming for a lot of educators, and even for us, the most experienced educators, that are trying to stay ahead, because we need to prepare. We need to make sure that we're bringing the best in our A game to our districts. And even for us, it can still get a little overwhelming. So for me, I have learned through my years now to really just streamline the process, find what works best to meet the learning objectives, because at the end, my customer is going to be my student. I also have my customer that's going to be my teacher. So I need to work with my teachers to help them feel comfortable with the tech, so that way they feel comfortable in presenting that tech with the students, and that the tech is simple enough and not creating any more roadblocks for students with the learning process. But what we see is, because of social media, we see that there are so many apps out there, and we've got some wonderful educators that are sharing how to use those apps, that oftentimes it may cause a FOMO for teachers, that fear of missing out. Like, oh my gosh, I see so and so is using this, and I want to use it, and I want to implement it in my class. And then you try and do what they do, and you may not get the same results. And so I
mm,
tell teachers, yes, the app is great and your intentions are good, but it may not always work out for you the same way that it worked out for the teacher next door. But it's that anxiety, that anxiousness. So, one thing that we've done in my district, which I was so thankful for when everything kind of shut down in 2020, they asked me, they're like, Fonz, which are the apps that we should have that just teachers need to focus on? And I said, you need Cami, you need Edpuzzle. Of course, we've got our Google Workspace and, Screencastify also at the time. So that's all we standardized on. And I said, the less that we use, or excuse me, the less apps that we have, the better we can kind of dive in deep. And it allowed me, as the only instructional software specialist for 14 schools, K through 12, to help me navigate that too. And by keeping it simple, it really has helped that when we came back, man, our teachers are still learning a little bit more of the nuances with a lot of the platforms and going in deeper, but now they just feel so comfortable with the tech because I always kind of make this analogy where a tech tool should feel more like an instrument. When you play an instrument, it's going to take some time. And I always use the example of a guitar. You're not going to pick up the guitar right away and you're going to be playing Stairway to Heaven. You're going to pick up the guitar, you're going to learn each note, you're going to learn some chords, and you're going to learn maybe your first two chords and you're going to be in pain. You're going to have some calluses. You're going to need to put some work in. You're going to feel frustrated at first. But the more that you play, the more that you practice, the more that you just strum along and find those notes and those chords and those scales, and the more proficient you feel, you're actually taking a deeper dive into that application and seeing what is there, as opposed to, this one hurts too much. And this one does almost the same thing, but it's got one little additional bell and whistle that may not be something that is that important into the learning objective. And so, like I said, sometimes there's way too much. So for me, top of mind is always what works best for you may not be what works best for somebody else. So please don't panic. Please don't have anxiety. Please don't have that fear of missing out. Use what you feel comfortable with, and then slowly you can kind of bring in some more apps. Slowly you can go ahead and try some things, and I'm there to help, just being a safety net for my teachers there in our district as they want to take their teaching to the next level or using an app. We had the Cami training session yesterday with the Wacom tablets, and there was some teachers that didn't know about the voice comments or the video feature that were built in, because a lot of them, they're newer teachers. Some of the teachers were teachers that, are a little bit just kind of scared, but their eyes lit up when they're like, oh my gosh, so now I don't have to repeat my instructions 10 million times. I can leave a little voice note here and the student can click on it and they can hear the instructions as many times as needed. And they were blown away with something so simple. But again, like I said, working with Cami, building their calluses. They learned one chord yesterday. For some of them, they learned three chords, but now they'll be playing their own little melodies within their classroom and helping their students continue to succeed and helping their workflow too as well. So that is my number one thing that is top of mind at this moment, is just that I wanted to share out and get off my chest, because I think there's a lot of teachers out there that need to hear that it's okay that you're not the teacher that knows 20 apps, that it's okay that you may not know 5. It's okay if you only know 2. What matters the most is that your students are learning and the objectives are being met, and you're creating a wonderful experience for them. And sometimes there may be teachers that can do it with no apps. So does that make them any less if they're not using any tech at all? So I tell my teachers too that good pedagogy can never be replaced by an app or a tech tool. It can only simply be enhanced.
Wow. Yeah. So much that I could
Right?
like unpack with all that fun. So one thing I saw from my friend Samantha here is keep it streamlined, right? Like 100% agree. Pick those top 3 tools and really work through them, really reinforce them with your students. Um, and with that, it kind of reminds me of first year teacher Steve, who came from a slightly different profession, right? So I came in with kind of a tech brain already, kind of like yourself, right? Like you had art, this you already had knowledge coming in with life. And so I wanted to try all the tools. And so I kind of made the mistake of what you're trying to allude to, right? Of you want to try everything, and I did. But as you were talking about, I was like, wait a second. The one thing, like looking like in hindsight, thinking back on it, is that actually was not good for my students. Like that's the most important, I think, element of that, is that my students were having to learn like all these tools. And sometimes it did feel overwhelming. And that was probably the mistake I made of like my first couple of years teaching. But then I really, really started to embrace this idea like, wait a second, there are like 5 tools. All I need are 5. And then it even shrank, like even like went down like 4 or 3, kind of like what Samantha was talking about, right? Like, and so that idea of less is more is actually, and more, probably more importantly, better for your students, as they're trying to consume just as much technology as we are. And yeah, they're probably tech savvy and some of them can handle it, but it's kind of naive to think that they all can handle it, right? Or they can handle it in the same exact way. Um, so that's kind of, that was my first thought as you were breaking all that down. Um, but you are right. Like as educators, we throw everything that we have, and for me, I still do, right? With my adult learners, like everything I have, I try to 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 support them, give them the tools, the knowledge, the guidance that they need. But it's hard to keep up with. And like I remember in when I was still in my former district, I served on a tech committee, and we were trying to like vet all our apps. I remember my first year in the committee, we had like 200 apps in our app portal. And someone at the top, I forgot who, but someone at the top was like, okay, we need to try to narrow this down, because there was like 3 or 4 tools, 5 tools that did the same thing. Like, cool, we have 6 video tools. And so like, why is that? Right. And so like making it's really encouraging Fonz to like kind of see you in that leadership kind of role, that leadership role, providing that guidance, trying to be a part of that conversation of this less is more kind of mentality.
Mhm.
Love it.
Yeah, and one of the things too that I even learned along the way, like you said, you're working with adult learners. I'm working with adult learners now with teachers, but still, going into the classrooms and things of that sort. But sometimes it's okay to allow students to lead with the tech. Really find out what's working for them as a whole. Because sometimes I think that we put the pressure on ourselves, like we are trying to force something to work because we want to make sure that we're keeping up with the Joneses, whether it's the teacher next door or whether it's the Twitter teacher, the Twitter, the crew, the PLN. And so that's why I always say it's important to know your customers, and know that means knowing your students. And again, as a whole, is this application working for them as a whole? Maybe it's 1 or 2 that aren't doing too well. Well, what can I do to fix it? Is this a me problem, or is this the platform problem? And sometimes you may have to say, as much as I love this, do they love it? And oftentimes, like I said, we can be, because we are at the front of the class. Sometimes it's like, nope, this is what we're going to use, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do today. And is it really a benefit to you in the end? And is it really a benefit to the student at the end?
So yes, 100%. So I'm just curious though, like Fonz, from your vantage point and where you are within your district, do you have like, because we have this conversation of like, okay, there are a lot of tools, we need to pick what works. And maybe I'm asking this from like a leadership
Mhm.
perspective, but maybe even like as an individual teacher, what is your, and I hate to use this word, but what is the rubric or maybe the standards or maybe the criteria to vet a tool to be like, oh no, this is worth using, this is worth investigating because of this or this. Do you have anything like that, or maybe like something that you kind of use in your
We
own mind?
in our district, and that's a great question. Like our district, up until maybe what was it, a year and a half ago, we didn't really have a rubric at all whatsoever. So what happens is this: like I don't want anybody to think like I don't allow teachers, or I tell everybody no, you can't use anything. No, because we do have some wonderful educators that are early adopters and are very good with the tech, and even they're the tech leaders in their campuses and so on, and they're sharing and things of that sort. And so we do have a lot of that happens. It doesn't happen at every campus, but even with that, you still have kind of, like I said, that anxiety and teachers feeling overwhelmed and because they can't keep up and so on. So we do have a rubric where what happens is there was a lot of campuses that were asking, hey, we want this and we want to buy this and we want to buy this. Well, at the district level, we can't afford that. Like, I mean, we can't afford to give everybody what they want. So everything requires data. And so what we did is we came up kind of with a little rubric questionnaire that if there is a specific application that you want us to look into, that you see is providing some results, that you see is working efficiently and effectively, then you can fill that out. And there are some requirements there. Number one, the one thing, quite at least here living in Texas, and if you're familiar with Texas, you all know it's all about the teaks. If it is not TEKS aligned, and if the verbiage isn't correct, because a lot of people have NGSS and then they have other, like, whatever it is, the alphabet soup that they have. If there isn't anything there that says TEKS aligned, we will not look at it. We will not even, take a glance at it at all whatsoever. As far as, again, being a platform that is to be purchased at the district level. So again, everything has to be TEKS aligned. Everything needs to be research based as well. And we're very cautious too with the research that is submitted, because anybody can say, oh, well, this is research based. Here we go. This is what we have. And they submit their white paper to you, or they submit something to you. But really, if you think about it, really data can be shaped any which way that you want it to sound. And so we're very cautious. We'll even call other districts. And luckily, through my network and our network, really, because we kind of run in the same circles and they intertwine, it's really like reaching out and say, hey, Steve, like, let me ask you, like, what are your thoughts on this? Hey, you've used this before. How have your teachers, taken that app? What do you see with your students? Has there been growth? Has there not been any growth? And you ask around and those things. But that's really, like I said, there's a couple more points there in the rubric that is available. And usually a lot of times what we get coming into those inboxes are teachers that, were on Twitter and say, hey, I want this. And they just look at it and they'll say, oh, I want this. And when they justify, they have no justification, and so we can't push through. It's almost like the logic stops there and then, doesn't proceed, and we don't get to look at that at all whatsoever. Although what I'll do is I'll look on it on the side, and being in the role that I'm in, I'm going to take a look at it regardless, and just to make sure, just, hey, let's check this out, see if it's worth the look at, and if it's worth the squeeze, if we do decide to change a platform or substitute a platform. And so we used to do long term kind of adoptions. And really now for our major platforms, it's kind of like a yearly thing. And that's kind of been a while now that we've kind of committed to some platforms, because I think there's been a lot of districts too, not only for ourselves, but they'll get some bad experiences where what they end up getting is not what they thought they were going to get. And so that too is, we know that EdTech, there is a bottom line that needs to be met as far as sales and things of that sort. But, you know, we understand that, but sometimes you're surprised that some of these platforms are kind of putting things in a certain way where now you're locked in, or you've got the freemiums, and hey, let's do this pilot for this much. Oh, but next year, oh, you want it for your students, oh, it's going to be 30,000, 50,000. So that is why I go back to, let's keep it simple, because of the duplication of efforts. Is this app that we're going to be paying $60,000 for, what they're able to do, can we do it within this app that we have, or maybe a little app smashing of what we already have adopted, so we don't spend that much money? And again, I'm just using that experience because we're a very small school district, so our budget is not something that is huge that we can just go out and pick and choose what we want. So we run very lean, and that's why, like I said, those things are very important. So again, that's at least our district experience that we have.
Yeah, yeah, and that just has to be part of it, right? Like in the sense of what you adopt, how you use it. Um, I would imagine teacher feedback
Mhm.
is a part of that conversation.
Yes, actually, thank you for bringing that up too, because what we do is we do send out a questionnaire, and we take that feedback very seriously. And again, that's the other hard part, Steve, that you get that feedback, but again, the decisions are based on the feedback that we get. And so that following year, when I'm rolling things out, I'm going to run into teachers that are upset. They're like, "Well, why did you get this? I filled it out and I said that I didn't want it." I was like, yes, you didn't want it, but the other 499 teachers said that they didn't have a problem with it, and they were actually being successful. And that's the hard part too, that being in a role like I am, I kind of have to be a buffer between the teacher and, my executive director and everything, because I'm in that spot. And like I said, it's where I have to explain to them, like, the data drives the decision, and this is what we saw is fit district wide based on that feedback. And I understand that many times teachers don't feel heard, or don't feel like, oh, you didn't pay attention to me, you're not taking this seriously. And again, that goes back to them still seeing that platform that following year, but we do look at every single response, and we'll even look at those suggestions, and then we take that and say, hey, let's do some research. And that happened with a platform actually this last year, where they were so adamant. And when we called up our region service center, and then when we spoke to the reps, they're like, oh yeah, because they kept saying, oh, this is perfect for, star prep. And then when we asked, well, what about the standards? Is this standards aligned? They're like, well, the standards are kind of sprinkled in there. And when we looked at the platform, really nothing was aligned with our standards. They had maybe like 2 or 3 lessons that were hidden within that platform that did have a standard. But when we saw what lessons they we're like, no way, like our teachers could do way better than this. And even our curriculum writers can do way better than this. So again, we're faced with making those difficult decisions. And sometimes, I know teachers go through a lot, and they don't see this side of it, but it is something interesting to be able to see this side, and, having to share the news of like, sorry, we weren't able to get what it is that you wanted. And that's tough. It really is.
Well, it kind of it's easy to just be the punching bag,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm hearing. I'm like, man, that is tough. And I know that like we all like when I was teaching, like we're all in our different vantage points, right? Like we're all in our different spots, and it's really easy for us to critique without knowing what the other side of that door is, right? Like and like as a teacher, I'm like, oh, I would really love this tool. I really love this tool. Or I could really live without this one and maybe replace it with something else. Um, but like kind of hearing your perspective on like how challenging that role is on the other side of being part of those conversations, being part of like also the work, right? Because it's work getting that feedback. It's work being part of those conversations and vetting tools and making sure that obviously things are running well on top of that, right? So tip my hat off to you, sir. Like that is really really good work on your end, but also like encouraging from me, knowing that like there's individuals like yourself that are putting in that needed work to make sure that we do have these tools in our classroom to hopefully make better, more accessible, more transformative experiences for our learners. So I really do appreciate that. Now going back to it, Fonz, because you did mention that you had one more thing um, in terms of top of mind, something that's top of mind under that cap, so to
Yeah.
speak. Sophie is with us
Yeah,
right now,
I know.
so I know that she's waiting.
Mhm.
Um, so, Fonz, if you don't mind, what is this other thing that is top of mind for you?
Yeah. Again, and I see Sophie here. I was like, oh, I'm sure she's here. She's got her popcorn ready because, we're going to be talking about AI, obviously, But I'm kind of glad that we kind of started off with that top of mind, that first section, because again, it's really that philosophy going into what we're seeing now,
Yeah.
that I guess that fear, that newness, everybody, there's so many experts now on Twitter, like, and on social media, and people that are doing things. And I'm just like, wow, like that was very quick and very fast. And so,
Mhm.
a lot of things too to consider is just really keeping it simple and streamlined. There's a lot of platforms that are doing the exact same thing, the duplication of efforts. It just depends on what your preference is as far as maybe user experience, outputs, and so on and so forth. But one interesting thing that I did want to talk about was that there was an article that came out by Education Week talking about how teachers are not using AI as much as everybody thinks they are. And I think that that's the buzz, at least in our circles. And if you notice, like ISTE presentations, probably TCEA and everywhere, it's going to be all AI. That's going to be the presentation theme for this year. It's going to be the year of AI. And sometimes I'm very shocked at the sense that with so many of us that are out there that are sharing our ideas, it's very interesting that we don't have nearly the usage that we should, and even within our own districts. But I think, and I'm going to say this again too, because in interviewing a lot of teachers, a lot of educators, practitioners, from higher ed too as well, I think that that newness of ChatGPT in 2022 really like skyrocketed, as far as making us alert and putting that on our radar. And then there's a lot of people like myself that are kind of like wait and see just to make sure, because this can change in any moment and in any way, shape, or form, which it did, in November, again, a year, almost to the year where Dev Day came out. And then you see that a lot of applications that were out there were created kind of went under. And then there's that fear. And for me, the fear is very real in the sense of, uh, will these platforms be there in a month? Will they be there next year? And as good as they are at what they're doing, who knows, with changes that may come about, all of those things, as far as, privacy issues too. One of the things with our district, and I know for a lot of districts, it's really student privacy. And in the end, who's going to be responsible for it? Are we signing something off that if anything were to happen, it's going to be that platform's fault? Or is the platform going to say, no, this is on you, it's you as a district, you guys are the ones that messed up, it wasn't us? So those are a lot of those fears and conversations. Now, as far as the productivity and things of that sort too as well, yes, they can help streamline your process. And the scary part about it is that there is no friction with AI. And what I mean by that is even your grandma can use it, because there is no really big knowledge that you need in it, because it was trained on our knowledge and the knowledge that is out there. So even your grandma can go ahead and type something into Chat GPT and be able to get an output that they want. And so there really isn't any friction to it, but it's more of that fear of the unknown, fear of that privacy. But I think that for a lot of us that are in this space, that are out there making some noise, we also have to take into account that it's okay if there are teachers that aren't using it, that it's okay that there are teachers that still want to wait. And teachers, it's okay if you don't want to use it. We need to embrace those feelings also. We need to embrace
Mhm.
you if you have a fear of it. That's okay. There is nothing wrong with you being fearful of using this new applications that are out there, this new technology. And that's why I'm glad that in our circles and the people that are sharing their experiences are putting them out there to help out. And again, we just need to just make ourselves aware that as much as we're pushing out, we need to also get that feedback from teachers that are scared, that need that additional support. What are we doing for them? Because it just seems like we're just kind of sharing within ourselves, but are we sharing it to the teachers that really need it? Are we having those talks? Are the leaders, stepping up and bringing that into their district? And I know that that could be very difficult. And I'll be honest with you, it may be difficult that to be able to bring those conversations into your space. And one more thing that I'm going to allude to that, I think also the adoption process might slow down just a little bit more now from January to the end of the year, and that's just my prediction, just because it's state testing season. And once January hits, it's all about that test. And teachers are just going to put everything aside, and they're going to feel like any other initiative is just going to take time away from teacher prep, because a lot of those scores, depend, or a lot of teachers that depend on those scores in a lot of places for pay. They depend on those scores for position. They depend on those scores for everything. And obviously for our students too, it's a report card for our district. It's a reflection of our teachers. And that's going to be very difficult. And so right now, my initiative is I'm going to be doing some lunch and learns for all our district. But at the same time, in me doing some of those lunch and learns, it's just to kind of get my foot in the door, kind of just getting them to try it, ask some questions, and then do some follow throughs with PD and your PJs, where I'll do a Saturday morning. They can just log in from home. We can have those conversations
Love that.
and just work continually and
Yeah.
just let it take its course. And again, for me, I depend on those leaders there in the schools themselves, those early adopters
Mhm.
that can help those teachers that are just feeling scared, feeling overwhelmed, and just kind of ease them into that process and ease them into the platforms. And again, just so that they are all aware. And as much as we would all love to do more, there's only so much that we can do ourselves too as well. So that was the other thing top of mind that we really need to work on. And again, too, keep in mind those teachers too that don't feel comfortable. Keep them in mind too as well. Don't overlook them just because they don't want to follow your program, just because they don't want to use your app, just because they feel uncomfortable during your presentation. Learn where that's coming from. What is the root? Where is that fear coming from? And work with that. Don't work against that.
Yeah, and like I love that you pointed out, and I believe this was said on your show recently with one of your guests on AI specifically, of like it's okay to fear. It's okay to fear what it is, and also the unknown, right? Because it's also one of those things where like, well, where are we headed with with this type of technology? So I and this idea that it's okay to be uneasy, it's okay to not want it right now, right? Because a lot of times, like I kind of get the feeling just being at school sites and talking with people, it's almost like there's like this gaslight kind of
Yeah.
culture of like, oh, you're not using the hottest thing right now, right?
Yes.
And because
Oh
it came
God.
out so fast, it came out of like nowhere. Like it wasn't like we kind of cracked open the door a little bit. Like we're like, boom, it kicked its way in, right? And it was here overnight almost, and like being able to process it, be able to think about it. I know that there's so many levels of fear and anxiety out there as a result of it now being out in the open. Now, my I guess my other question for you, Fonz, is because you mentioned that like it's not being used. I guess the usage of AI is not being used by teachers um, at the level that we thought it would.
Yeah. 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 It's like you said, it's been a slow process, you know.
Right.
I'm not saying that a lot of teachers aren't there using it, but
Mhm.
it's almost like with anything, like, you know, from the top down, think of, you know, working in your district when there's an initiative that comes from the top down,
Mhm.
you know, it kind of works its way down, and sometimes it takes time to get all the way to like everybody to feel comfortable with those things. So you know,
Yeah.
and that's what I mean there too. And again, um, I know it's going to grow this year for sure, because everybody's going to be, you know, teaching about it, and they're bringing that knowledge to their districts, and I'm excited about that too. The one thing too that I'm very aware of and kind of worried about too is the habits that we can form by using AI. And what
Mhm.
I mean by that is simply putting in a prompt and getting something out and just saying, "Oh, okay, I'm done," and just ship it off to the students via their LMS. Here's your assignment. Here's this, here's that, and just doing it in that fashion. That's what concerns me, that, you know, we're going to just look at that first output and think that that output is going to be 100% correct. As we know, there is a warning there for all these apps and large language or large language models, that there is some algorithmic bias, because the data that has been used has some bias in it. So we need to be very cautious with that too as well. So as the educators and as kind of the gatekeepers of this, or the key master, no, yeah, the gatekeepers, you know, to be able to look at that data, look at that output, and make sure that it is true and that it aligns with what you're teaching, and making sure that your students are getting something that is not false, and or something that is
Mhm.
not going to cause any issues, is very important. So those are just some of the things that I worry about, because it could be very, I can easily just say, "Hey, I need a math worksheet that covers fractions," and I pop that in. And I've done that with several platforms, and I'll even put the state standard in there, and I don't get what I need in a lot of iterations of that. And so sometimes it's like, you know, I know that it could facilitate some things, but as far as, you know, a lot of the things as output to give to students, I'm still very cautious about that, and just, you know, making sure that I rework that to make sure that it aligns with what we're trying to accomplish. So those are just some of the things there too as well, that I have a fear of, that bad habit of, poop, here we go, one and done, and we're good. Here's your worksheet, and that's it, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, like because the other part of that fear, at least to me, forming is so we kind of talked about like, oh, not that many teachers are using it, relatively speaking. But my guess is, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, because I've not looked or seen data to support this, but like my guess is that the student usage of AI is probably pretty strong, I would imagine. Does that sound close to being on point? Or because my fear is like if students are using it a lot and it's really not being used by teachers, there's some ramifications
Yeah.
there, right? At least at the moment. I'm just curious, like what you know on that, or like what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Well, I don't know exact numbers either, you know, to be honest with you. But
Okay.
and again, this is just anecdotal, just from interviews that
Hmm.
I've done with just, and again, this is only speaking higher ed, but even higher ed professors are like, wow, like I'm surprised that they haven't been using it, or some of them have never even seen it or used it or even logged in, and so on. So I'm sure that there is, you know, some hot spots and pockets where maybe there's certain grade levels, and of course people they hear about it, they're going to use it. But I agree, we'll stick to this point, just because I don't want to, you know, quote or have me quoted as saying something wrong. But I agree in that what you said, that if there are more students using it than teachers, there can be some issues there. Obviously, the big topic is always plagiarism and so on and so
Right.
forth, and creativity being stifled, critical thinking being stifled. But again, it's just really learning how to navigate the tool and using it properly. But that all starts with proper training, some kind of
Mhm.
proper training. And as we know, there's so many people out there with so many ideas that you're like, well, which one's more right? Which one can I use? Does this one make sense? Does that one make sense? And then there's people that piecemeal things together, and now there's something new that comes out. And so that's the interesting time that we live in, like right now, that we need to navigate that space. But at the end, you just got to go back to just keeping it simple and streamlined. And really, like I said, as a district leader, maybe just say, okay, this is the one that we're going to pick. Maybe do get some teacher feedback. Which of these have you heard of? Which of these have you used? Which ones do you feel comfortable with? What have you seen? Bring that data to all of your stakeholders and have those discussions. And I think that's what we need more of, that those discussions are not taking place because, like I mentioned, right now, January to the end of the year, the discussion is going to be, what are the state test scores going to look like? What are your data point assessments looking like? What are your tutorial groups looking like? Are we making sure that this group of students is getting the extra tutoring? Is this school doing well? Is that school doing well? And those are the conversations right now that are going to be had. But there has to be a time made for all major stakeholders within a district, and including parents, to sit together, and students to sit together and have these discussions and see where you can go and what you can work on to work on this together as a whole, as a community. So again, that's just me. Those are my 2 cents on that, as far as AI and in a district setting and what we're seeing now.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. So Fonz, I'm gonna kind of full circle here. Because like the way we started this conversation with EdTech broadly is keeping things simple. So if we looking at AI, it feels so not simple
Yeah.
with the conversation we just had, right? So how if you're a teacher and you're an educator out there that like, like, okay, I want to start at least feeling more comfortable with using a chat GPT or an AI or what, whatever it is. Um, how could they, if they've never used it before, what are some tips you have? How could they keep it simple
Yeah.
to get the ball rolling a little bit, at least to learn what it is, how it, and like almost like how to engage with it initially? Because that's one struggle I had when it first came out. And I was like, just deal like what it popped back out at me was like, no, 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 that's not right. And then like going through the iterations, right, going through the different versions and drafts. So what tips or what would you say to someone that's like, hey, how could I keep this simple if this is my first time going down this rabbit hole of AI?
Yeah. What I would do is just simply start with Chat GPT. Like, I mean, it just all depends. Like, for me, with my teachers, I just say just keep it simple and go with anything that is free. I know that you're gonna have, teachers that obviously they want to protect their privacy. They don't want any data out there and so on.
Mhm.
But that's okay. And there's some alternatives for that too as well, and you just play around with it. But again, for me, just to feel more comfortable is just go to ChatGPT, go to something that is free, and just play around. Just figure something out. Think of things that you would normally do, those tasks that are so menial for you, and think of what you can do to help you either just answer emails, do something simple, maybe just work on a schedule, do something that maybe doesn't even tie to teaching, just something personal for yourself. What are some things that just are overbearing? Just a to-do list. Maybe just say, hey, how can I accomplish this in 3 days? Or what are your suggestions? So again, it's just practicing with that, and it's just having fun more than anything. And I think that's something that sounds weird, but you got to have a little bit of fun with it and just try it out, be silly. I know for myself, with some of the things that I've shared with teachers, is just change the story ending from, the big bad wolf being the bad guy into being the good guy, and just something simple and see what it comes up with. Just something silly. Experiment, play, have fun, and don't take yourself too seriously. But as you're doing those things, just learn. That's the part of the learning process. We just got to overcome that fear. So I know that there's many resources that are out there that are free that you can go ahead and use take some suggestions from your friends. More than anything, your teacher next door that's using it, ask them for help. Ask them, like, hey, how can I try this? How can I do this? And there's plenty of ed tech apps that are out there that are offering just something similar. You've got eduaid, you've got magic school, you've got currypod, you've got all of these wonderful apps. Play around with adobe express, the text to image generators, things of that sort. Just play around, experiment, have some fun. But while you're doing that, find out what's working for you, find out what doesn't, and then stick to what does and try and implement that as best as you can. And it's okay to not know everything. And it's okay if maybe it doesn't work out the way that you want it to, because chances are many times your students will be like, oh, this is the way it needs to get done. And now you're learning from your students, and you're learning from your community. So that's been kind of the way that I've lived my life in the classroom, is just taking that little bit of risk and learning from my students in the end.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Fonz, thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. For anybody that's listening now or in the future, where are you? If they need support, if they want to reach out, if they want to be a guest on MyEdtech Life. And by the way, I've been a guest. It's a complete, amazing, awesome experience. Where can they find you, Fonz?
Yeah, absolutely. You can visit my website at myedtech.life, myedtech.life, where you can check out our 261 episodes. And I promise you, you'll find something for any situation, any need. And you'll definitely find some great knowledge nuggets there in those episodes. And also, if you want to be a guest, please make sure you contact me. Find me on all socials at myedtech life. Connect with me. Just send me a DM. Say, hey, you know what? I'm interested in being a guest. We can have this conversation, so on and so forth. We can make it happen. Just reach out. Don't hesitate. And but yeah, that's where you can find me. And again, I'm always here to support. I may not have all the answers for your questions, but I guarantee you that I will make sure we find those answers and we get you what you need, because that's what I'm here for, and that's what we're all here for. So never feel alone, and never feel like that your question may not be worth asking. Every question is worth asking, and I definitely want to help you find the answers to anything that you have. All right, guys. So reach out. I'm friendly. I don't bite, and I'm always willing to help. So make sure
Absolutely,
you follow.
absolutely. And and on that note, if you're gonna go be a guest on Fonz's show, you're more than welcome to come on my show. We can do like a double header even, right? And so with my show, similar to Fonz, I have my own website, underhatpod.com. So that is where you can find all the social links. You can find the episodes. All of my episodes are going to be dropped in places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify. So that is the place to go. On my website, you can also find a registration form. If you want to be a guest, all are welcome. Educator, administrator, even if you're coming from the ed tech space, um, anything or anyone that has something of top of mind in education, I am keen for. And for those that are listening live, thank you so much. Some are people that I've not met before, while others are good friends of mine. And so, yes, I'm gonna update a hat in the foreseen future with my own brand. So keep an eye out for that. But for those that are here and those that are listening, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of your school year. And please, please, please keep our sanity there. Keep ourselves striving. Keep ourselves thriving in education. And without further ado, We're gonna have a good night. We'll see you next time.